so much for sharing all your experience about the application process and the preparation for OCIs. Now let's move on to the OCI experience itself. I know that it can be overwhelming, especially for someone who hasn't done this before. It's like a speed dating experience. So I want to hear more on how you did it, because for you, I'm assuming it was virtual. So you also have to be familiar with the tech and the different platforms, etc.
Yeah, it was very, intense. I agree. So the first thing that I did was, after getting my times, the names of my interviewers, I went online and I researched about them. But not only that, I had a piece of paper. I was a bit extra, I would say. I had for each of the law firms, I had like 2 to 3 pages for each of the law firm, and I put their pictures there. Like I went to their website, put their pictures, put their name, put their background. Like, did they article in that law firm? Did they summer in that law firm? So you don't ask a question like, how is your experience summering in this law firm, right? So you want to know. So I did that. If there were ITLs, I put it there. If they had any major publications, I put it there. I put things about the law firm in particular and things about the summer program also in particular. And then I was also specific as to why I wanted that law firm. Like I scoured through all their like websites. So I did all of that. And
For
then
8 firms.
Oh yeah, for 8 firms.
That was a lot of work. Okay.
Sometimes, like I said, I was extra. Like,
That's amazing though. This is how you
and,
show that you're dedicated.
yeah. And then I think another thing I did was if I'd spoken to anybody from that law firm, I put their names there. So I'm able to, in case I want to refer to a conversation that I had, I'm not going to be thinking or scrambling for their names because I'm not the best with names. So what I did was I did this like a couple of weeks earlier, but like maybe like close to the day, but not too close because I was studying for an NCA exam. And so what happened was I had all of this done for each of the 8 law firms. But the thing was, some of my questions were similar. So it wasn't like I had to overly think of the questions to ask. And so then the day before the exam, before the interview, I again set up my desk, set up my laptop. I did like a pre-Zoom thing for myself just to see how it would like show up for the other person watching it. I also had my sister call me just so she would tell me how it sounded from her end. Again, just to be ready with the video setting. And then something else that I did was I printed out everything that I had prepared for this firms and I read through it the night just so that, to refresh my memory about all of these things. And I think yeah,
This was a paper printout, right? You didn't have any post-its around your screen or your like another document that you can, because you could tell if someone's reading something else on the screen.
Yeah, I did not. Because again, I think for me, I find that a couple of things, I find that if I rehearse something too much, I don't sound very natural. My personality doesn't come through. I'm a pretty bubbly person, but if I'm rehearsed, I'm too like somber. So I don't over rehearse things. I have like key points that I know I want to touch on. So I did all of that with my sister. I had like a pre-interview with my sister also. It was more, okay, I'm not going to rehearse too much, but I want to know what I want to touch on and that kind of thing. So I didn't have post-it notes. I did have my documents by my side because after each interview, if I wanted to just like refresh my memory about the next law firm, I'm taking my documents to just like flip through it, but no post-it notes on my
That's amazing. And so these were like what, 17, 18-minute interviews? And were they back to back? Did you have time between them to refresh your memory? How were they scheduled? Were they spread out or were they really?
They were pretty spread out. Some were back to back. I think about 2 of them, like 2 separate ones, were back to back, but I think the rest were pretty spread out. So that was lovely. And it was just great because, yeah, that was lovely that I didn't have everything back to back. And I think for some, actually, we got talking. Like, again, I approached the interviews like I'm going to have a conversation with people that I've read up about. And again, if we don't connect, we're just not a good fit. That was my mindset. So I went there like ready to say hi, like being professional, but also being friendly. And another thing that I did was for my interview. Like I didn't always have to wait till the end to ask my questions. Like if we're talking and something comes up, I'm like, I'm really sorry. I hope you don't mind if I ask a question. You're like, no, sure, go ahead. And so I would ask the question because sometimes you might want to ask about something that pops up the first 5 minutes of your interview, but by the time you're able to ask a question, you already forgot.
Yes.
And that might have been a wonderful question. So it's more,
and it's natural because it comes through the conversation.
exactly. So I approached it that way. There was, I think, about two of them where my interviewers did not show up. When I mean they didn't show up, I mean that they had to switch with somebody else, right?
Oh, so you're like,
So,
okay, for you.
so no, so like even if you have researched about an interviewer, right, be ready for a different person that you know nothing about to also interview you. So in that sense, you would have to freestyle. You would have to maybe, because they're introducing themselves in the beginning of each interview, so listen and pick one or two things from their introduction and then ask about it because it shows that you're listening. Like that's what I did. So
yeah, absolutely. Was there anything, any questions that you were not prepared for that surprised you and how you navigated that? Also, anything about the process itself that you didn't expect, the tech, the engagement, because they're staring at the screen all day. So how do you, I think engagement is also an important factor.
yeah. So questions that I didn't expect. Again, I had gone
Were
through,
they very similar in terms of like the format?
there were seven of them were similar, one was different.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember. So seven were more conversational, like very much, hey, what are you up? What are you all about? What have you done? Oh, that's interesting. Let's talk more about this. So nothing like it didn't have like a list of preset questions that they were going through. So it was for seven of them, it was more conversational. And questions, there was the behavioral questions. Then the eighth one, it was more, they had preset questions. I believe there were more. I understand that is a difference right now, not difference, but these conversation going around about interview styles and how, having more conversational styled questions may give room for bias. And so I know that some law firms, they have like preset questions that they ask everyone, regardless of your background, in the sense that I believe that the rationale is they're asking everyone the same question to remove bias.
And to
So
compare them easily.
exactly. So that happened to me for the eighth one. The problem really with that was, or the challenge really was, the questions were tailored more for JD students. And so I'm like, I was being asked about like things that I haven't done in the past 6 years. And so it was like, I'm sorry, can I use my work experience to respond to your question? Like I had to ask because I just didn't think, using 8 years ago would be, of benefit for both of us. And they're like, yeah, sure, you could use your, work experience to answer the question. So that was what I did. So yeah.
Question, and you feel free to not respond if you want. Did that firm eventually offer you a position? Because I think that when you go into an interview process with preset questions, you are also looking to listen to specific answers. So it's very hard to evaluate someone who's coming with a different background that is giving you something else. Did that work with that firm or not?
So they reached out to me afterwards about the interview, the in-firms, but honestly, I think after that interview, I kind of like didn't want to work with the firm. Or like I left the whole process saying, okay, so I have 7 law firms that I'm actually, still like I liked the vibe because, and honestly, I think it was the last interview for me of that day. And so I had like this 7 to compare with it. And I think for them, maybe they were also tired again, because they're also human beings, right? So I just didn't feel that connection with any of them. So I was like, you know what? I think, no.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, because it's exactly what you're reminding everyone. You have to remember the value that you're bringing. And if you are connecting with the firm, it's not you're selling, you're also buying to see if they are the firm you want to be. So this is great. Okay. And then, okay, these behavioral questions or preset questions, were there some that repeated, or in terms of the typical questions that I hear generally from students are, how do you work under pressure? If we keep giving you work, do you know how to say no? Like these type of things. No, no one asked you this.
Nobody actually that. I think because I've done the work. I think for me, because of my experience, they were like, okay, this person probably works. Yeah. But I think more of the questions that I received was, again, why Canada? Like every person asked me that. Why Canada? Another thing was, I had this one question, which I don't think I would ever forget, because it was very interesting. I think my answer was very unusual. So I was asked, and I'm not even sure why I didn't expect the question. It was more, I'm paraphrasing, right? It was about, since I have all of this experience, right? I'm starting I'm starting afresh with people that, are students, and and maybe like, how would I get used to going from, being the experienced person to starting afresh? I'm paraphrasing, but the first time the person asked the question, I didn't even understand. So I was like, sorry, please, could you like clarify your question? And then she explained it. And I was like, okay, I didn't prepare for this question. I did not prepare for this question. And so what I did was I asked her, I was like, is it possible to answer this question with a non-professional like example? And she's like, yeah, sure. And I mentioned how I literally used to dance as a child. And I came to Canada and I just joined a dance group. And in my dance group, I'm the oldest. There are a lot of teenagers there, and I'm even older than the teacher. But for me, if you're open to learning, like you're open to learning, that's the attitude to have. And I was just like, because I didn't even have time to think of any response. I had to think of what was the most recent thing that I did.
That's an amazing answer. I think you just covered them, because anything else you would have said, like, yes, of course I can do this, it would have been just like a superficial answer. This is an amazing answer.
So I was just like, in my head, I was like, this is so not a professional, like my example is not work related, but that's what just happened. And that's the only way I can explain it. And she's like, okay, all right.
This is an amazing answer. And a friend of mine was asked the same question when she was going through in firms. She was coming with 10 years of experience, and they asked her, how do you feel getting instructions from someone who's probably younger than you? And because you're starting as a summer and education student, and she just said, well, it is what it is, part of the job. And it was a satisfying answer. So you just have to show that you know that this is part of the process, and
Yeah.
fine with that.
For sure, for sure. I had other questions about, again, similar questions about mistakes that I have done before. I think I had a question about having to, I believe it was, if I disagree with maybe my supervisor and how I, would communicate that. I had a question about a time that I was swamped and what I had to do about it, I believe. And then that taught me something, because I had a response for that. But they had a follow-on question, which thankfully, again, I would always advise people to be truthful. Do not don't create a story for your interviews. So I didn't even prepare for the follow-on question, but because it happened to me, I had a response for the following question. So I think a lot of people just focus more on that first question, and there's no preparation for the following question. So that's something that I would suggest, that even if you answer any question, think of what other questions could come from your answer and try to prepare an answer for that.
What was it? Do you remember what was the following question?
Yeah, so it was more it was I can't remember the exact question, but I remember the answer was it was more about what happened when my answer was about somebody had left the firm. And so there was a problem trying to get information from that person, and what I did to solve it. Like I reached out to the person, and I definitely utilized the resources that I had. I reached out to my colleagues, and we all worked together. And then, we also planned for it not to happen again. And he had asked me, what exactly did you do for it not to happen again?
Okay.
Right. And so thankfully, because it was something that I'd done, It was more when you're leaving the firm, you're creating a report as to what you're doing, where you're at, who to the contact. So that was something I could easily say because it
Correct.
was something that I did or we did in the firm. So yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a very good point about, because everyone is kind of knows how to answer these questions when you go to these interviews, but you're not prepared about the follow-up question.
Yeah, so that that kind of tripped me about like, oh, okay, I know the answer, but like I didn't expect the question. And something I watched prior to my interviews that helped me, the person was saying it was one of the interviews with most of the career development team in this law firm. And the person said, when you're preparing for an interview, have about 6 to 8 stories, like
Yes,
of your experience. Maybe something about you being swamped at work, maybe something about, making a mistake. Have the stories ready so that if a question is asked, you can easily like tap into the stories and just like speak about it and explain like your process.
absolutely. And what I like to say to students is just because they're asking you about one thing doesn't mean that in your story you cannot touch on other things about how you work, how you're creative, how you work with other people. Just because they ask you how you perform under pressure. So you can bring a lot of other skills in your answer. And but when they ask you in another question about how you work with other people, don't mention the same story again. Come up
Yeah,
with multiple stories.
yes, for sure. For sure.
Um, so I think this is great. At the end of the process, were you kind of did you have an idea about which interviews flowed naturally and which ones were not a match?
Yes, yes, I did. I think out of the 7 that I was like really like, okay, yes. I think there was 3 of them that went really well. Like for me, there was 3 of them that went really well. But even the third one, I was a bit hesitant because I was the one who kind of caught the call
Mhm.
interview. And I maybe should have continued because they were like really like we were talking about theater. We had gone beyond law at this point.
Oh, wow.
But I was like, yeah, it's 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, and I think for me, I was being concerned that they had, another interview after. So for me, I was being considerate. I was like, I don't want to take too much of your time. Apparently, I should have stayed because I spoke to people afterwards and they're like, no, you should have stayed if they were
Really?
to continue the interview. But I was like, the policy says like I was like, I'm not so sure, but I just want to be very considerate as to like, because I'm not exactly sure if I should continue the call or not. But the conversation was lovely. Like I wanted to, but I was
Oh,
just being mindful of like their time. I didn't have any interview after that one, but again, I was trying to be mindful. But everyone I spoke with were like, nah, you should have stayed on that call.
okay. I mean, it doesn't harm to ask. I don't have any other interview. Oh, also, you don't want to divulge too much of what you're doing next. So you don't want to tell them, I have nothing for the rest of the day. Let's keep chatting. So I understand that you're coming from both sides.
Yeah.
Um, you can tell them I have 10 more minutes to continue if you'd like, but I also understand that you may have another interview. Something like to acknowledge
Yeah.
this is a
That would have been a better like because I was like I just saw that it is I was like, oh, I just saw that this is the time, and I just realized that the time is up, and this like I should have done something different, like, oh, I think I do have like 10 more minutes to talk. I don't know if you still have capacity. We can
Mhm.
continue. But yeah.
Okay. And in terms of professional attire, because you're doing a Zoom interview, like were you wearing your PJs and your blazer? Like how did you prepare for this?
I was formal, except for like, shoes. I didn't wear shoes, right? Yeah. But like I think for me, it's more when I'm dressed formally, like I give up, like I feel professional and it comes through in my response. Like if I wear like PJs, half of me is still asleep. Half of me is not professional. So that also comes through. At least that's for me. So I wore a suit and it was blue, and I think blue is a good color to wear. I think it comes across the camera or the screens. So yeah, I was
Amazing.
professionally dressed. Yes, I really was.
And I agree with you. Like what you wear kind of helps you present better. So it changes the way you put yourself out there. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. Okay. Anything else you want to touch on the OCI experience? I think we were good. covered everything, but if you were giving these specific tips to students.
The first thing I would say is, you know that answer where they say, tell me about yourself, and you have this rehearsed 3 minutes speech? Nah, it's not always going to happen. Usually what happened was everybody introduced themselves when they started the conversation. And so it was up to you to introduce yourself. But you're also being aware in the sense that they didn't spend up to 2 minutes introducing themselves. So you should not spend up to 2 minutes introducing yourself. So you have to pick the most important part, like where you are right now. I'm an LLM student. What you did, where you're from. I'm originally from this. And, I'm here now. And, you can even end with a joke like, I'm here now, excited to be here to talk with you. Like, again, very short and to the point. Should be up to a minute, but you should touch on the highlights of your background. So the whole 3 minutes rehearsing about yourself.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's a great tip, and I totally agree. And in this 30-second, you can also touch a bit on about I've practiced here and there for X number of years, and I have this maybe academic background, and I'm here doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. Don't talk about. Yeah. To give him a reminder, because they have your application in front of them. So this is great. And any final tips about stressing out and organizing the day or all of that?
I think for me, it's more when you mess up, because inevitably you're going to mess up one of these interviews. It's just life. Really, pick yourself. Honestly, try to, walk your way back, because it can easily destabilize you for the rest of the day and for the rest of your interviews, because you're just thinking of this one mistake that you made. But try as much as possible to focus on the positives. Ensure that you have maybe snacks by your side somewhere, fuel up. You want to also be energized all through the day, because they're seeing so many people. So the more you seem upbeat, the more, if they're tired, your I would say your upbeat nature could spread to them and cheer them up. So yeah.
That's a great tip. That's amazing. And I've never heard about what you mentioned, so I really appreciate you mentioning about when you mess up, try to focus on the rest of it. So it's not over until it's over.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, then OCIs are over. I guess you're also at the time to sleep and relax and chill. And then after that is the infirms. So what happened after?
So after that, I reached out to, no, I didn't reach out to anybody actually. No, I did not. So
you didn't send them thank you emails, all of that?
No, I did this prior to, because after I spoke with everyone I spoke with, I sent them a message saying thank you. Thank you for your time and thank you for your response. I really appreciate this. And so I didn't wait till after the interview to say thank you. It was immediately and straightforward. Then. I think so. After this, it was more I just relaxed, because again, I've done the interview. But what happened was, right from the get-go, some firm had already contacted me, we're going to contact you for infirms. I think the next week or so, I already had some of that happen. So I was okay, cool. And then I also had some people tell me no. No.
Really?
Okay, cool. Also, right? Very early on during the process. So there were already some firms I already took out of my list. Okay, it's not happening, unfortunately. So also towards the infirms, the day for the callback, I had my pen, my paper. I'd done my research as to how to schedule the infirms. I was yeah. I woke up that morning, had my phone by my side, my pen, my paper ready to schedule a lot of law firms.
Did you have them prioritized 8 a.m. this firm?
Yes, I did. But I think not unfortunate. I think it's also more managing expectations, because I felt even though I preferred 3 of the interviews, I felt all 7 of them went well, right? So I was yes, I'm gonna get a lot of callbacks. No, I didn't get all of their calls. So that was pretty I was oh, okay. I could have sworn I did amazingly well. It just didn't happen for some law firms. But yeah, I got so that day I had my pen, and what I'd done my research, and I realized that, if there's a message you're passing with the timing you're picking, again, it's like with the day you're picking, if possible, try not to pick anything for the second day, always the first day. Even if it's offered to you, ask if they have an opening for the first day. Show that you are interested in interviewing with them. So thankfully, I got my interviews for the first day. And,
How many interviews did you get?
I believe it was like 2. So it was like morning, so it was like 10-ish. So that happened.
Good.
But I only actually chose to interview with one.
Okay.
Like I said, the other firm, I didn't want to work with.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah. So it was this one. And this was the firm that they had been like, remember I mentioned how a firm reached out to me right immediately back? Like I was interested in them. They were interested in me. So it was like, okay, let's see how it goes. And
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So that which means that you have a lot of time to prepare now, because when you're interviewing with a lot of firms, you're really scattered, and in the end, it may not work. But if you're focusing on one, that actually maximizes your chances.
Yes.
So you scheduled it at 10 a.m. and was it in person or was it still Zoom?
Oh, it was in person. It was in person. So I got a call scheduling it in person. It was 2 hours. And then I think 2 days later, I got another call from that law firm inviting me for a dinner that same day. So I was like, okay, all right, cool. This seems like a great, like I see interest. I also have interest in you. I like the interview with you. So, okay. So I did my research about the firm, and I think like a week or so, or 2 weeks beforehand, I got the names of my interviewers. So it was a series of 2 sets of interviews with 2 different people for 45 minutes, I believe. And then the remaining 30 minutes is more you're in the cafe interacting with other summer students, other associates, and maybe even partners that are there. So it's more, that's also a form of interview, but it's a different sense of interview. And then for the dinner was from 7 p.m. to like 11:30-ish p.m. But yeah, so that was the first set of interviews that I had.
And did they lead to follow-up interviews the following days or?
Yes. So the good thing is for the first day, you have enough chance to research your interviewers. The bad thing is for the second day, you don't have enough time to research your interviewers. So what had happened was, and they also give you a hostess or a host who's going to take you around. So what I did was I had called my hostess prior to the day, and I asked if we could meet up 30 minutes earlier, just so that, I want to be able to I want to talk to my host as friends.
Amazing.
Like, I want to have like a conversation with you. And she graciously agreed to it. So very thankful to her. And then, so we met up on that day. We spoke for like 30 minutes. She told me her background. She's an ITL, and we bonded over that. And she was actually really pleasant. I'm actually doing work for her right now. Very pleasant lady. And then after the first set of interviews, we went to the cafe, and when I was leaving, I was told that I have another interview for the next day. What time do I prefer? I picked 10 again, since it's the same thing. So I picked 10 again. So after the first interview, there's a couple of things that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to send emails to say thank you first to your interviewers and all of that. And remember, I also had a dinner later that night, right? So I also was preparing for the dinner. Like I had to Google the restaurant, see what kind of food is there, what to order, what not to order, because it's also an interview, right? And I had to refresh on my dining etiquette.
Yeah.
Also something that you want to prepare for. So that's go on YouTube, read anything, blogs about like etiquette folks. So I stayed close by. I didn't go back home after that. And then when it was like 7, I got there. There's usually the thing where they say try not to go too early or too late. I was the first person there. I was exactly on time, but I don't mind that because for me, again, it's a strategic thing in the sense that when you're early, people come to you.
Mhm.
If you're late, you have to find people to go talk to. And sometimes they might be talking to somebody, so it might be difficult to get into that conversation. But if you're first there, people who are unsure as to what to do will come to you, and you can both be unsure together or bond about the fact that you're unsure. So that happened. I got there early and everyone was pleasant. We first had like a 30 minutes reception where you're talking. Remember, you don't know any of these people. You didn't have the chance to research them. So it's more natural and organic.
Mhm.
But whatever it is you're doing, try to talk. Something that I observed, and I've been telling everybody about this, is that your experiences are different, but they are very, like, they're different from most of the people in Canada or the JD students here, but they're also very impressive. But it's also in the sense that whenever there's a conversation going on, it's very easy for people to slip back into things that they are familiar with. So if you're talking with a lawyer and there's a JD student with you, you could be talking together and you could find that they're talking about their moot experience, which you have no experience in. It is your duty to find something that is similar to what they're saying and still be in that conversation. For instance, if they're talking about moots, I didn't moot in school, but I have dispute resolution. Like, I have experience in litigation. And so I would say something like, oh yeah, I did actually do moot, but I do have some experience in litigation. And there's a similarity in the sense that you are making arguments, you're advocating for a position. So you have to find a similar, you need to make yourself relatable to the people you're speaking with. Otherwise, it's very easy to find yourself out of a conversation, even if you started the conversation. So it is your responsibility. You have experiences, draw upon them. Like, somebody might be talking about IP. Maybe you haven't done IP in a long time, but you did something that is, IP related. Maybe you worked on a tech agreement. Find a way to make it similar to what they're saying and remain in that conversation. It's
Uh,
also something that is being watched. So yeah.
Absolutely. And briefly, if you can touch on the questions that you received, because now we're not talking about for 70 minutes, it's 45 minutes each, and there are follow-up interviews. Where was there something about this process that was different or that you didn't expect? You talked about your background, you talked about your experience. What was different from the OCIs?
I think it was more friendlier for me. I think because I do better when I'm talking to somebody in person. Like, I think for me, I'm able to like be like, I think when there's a screen between both of us, like, I'm still myself, but I feel like when I'm in person when I'm talking to somebody in person, it's easier to have a conversation. So I think for me, it was more, you know, I didn't make it seem like an interview. It was more conversational, back and forth. It was like, oh, how was your experience in this? Oh, I saw you did this, even before the last minute for the exam, for the questions rather. So that was really what happened. I was also be ready for questions about your experience. Like, if there's anything on your resume, be able to speak about it for at least 2 minutes. Like, have something down, even if it's about your paper. Somebody might ask you, what is something that is not on your resume that you would like me to know? That's something somebody asked me. And so don't limit yourself to what is on your resume, because when preparing your resume, remember you had to take out things from the resume, right? So put your mind as to, like, avert your mind to things like that. So, but nothing really was like out of place, I think, for me. I think it was more, I also asked about their work and I had follow-on questions. I think it shows that you listen and that you're hearing what they're saying and you find what they're saying interesting. But
That's so important. Yeah, because you're usually listening to respond or you're listening to cover the silence. So that's a very good tip.
yeah,
And overall, if we were to wrap up, any specific tips for students about the whole process?
be confident, honestly. I think that's something that you're looking for. Like, even if you're saying, even if what you're saying is not the most important thing, say it confidently, honestly. Like,
That's That's amazing. Yes, and I agree. That
Yeah.
remind yourself of the value that you're bringing in, and they're not you're not trying to sell it to them. You're also trying to buy to see if you
Yeah.
like them, if it's a good fit. You don't want to be hired anywhere. You want to have a good experience.
Yes, actually, yes. I think another thing that helped me was, and I think every person that is going through this process should have this at the back of their mind, like there are other pathways, there are other alternatives. Because I find that when you look at something as your only pathway, you get extremely tense. Like you want it so bad that you make mistakes. So
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a
so
great reminder. There are so many other paths to going wherever you want to go.
mhm. So
That's
that's the one thing I would always say. Remember that, you have a lot of experience, you have options, even though it doesn't seem like it sometimes, you really do have options, and just have that at the back of your mind.
exactly. And there are so many other things you can do after this process is over, even if it doesn't work out. And this
Exactly.
is a great reminder. There's so many positions, so many great firms that are not necessarily.
There are people that are not on the OCI that don't do that process. There's a lot actually. There is a lot. So
Well, that was very helpful. Thank you so much for your time. I think this is going to help a lot of students who are in the same process. And I'm sure that they can find you on LinkedIn and reach out, which most students do when they watch these interviews. So this doesn't end here. And I'm sure you'll keep mentoring students as I am. And because you cannot cover everything within an hour of an interview. So thank you so much for this. And for everyone who watched, thank you so much. Stay tuned for following episodes on the Successful ITL.